Thanks everyone for joining us this evening at Enwayaang. We call this Enwayaang a series of extraordinary talks, and we are named Enwayaang because our building is named Enwayaang, which means the way we speak together. And we take that quite literally and try to speak together on these Enwayaang talks on Zoom. So that's wonderful. I would add that Alana just said that we are recording this afternoon. And if you are on screen, you will not be in the recording unless you're asking a question and talking. So for those of us who are looking at all your faces, it's great to keep you on screen because it's nice to see audience when you're giving a talk. So feel free to be on screen. You will not be in the recording for this portion. So I'll start with, my name is Dr. Melanie Buttle, and I'm the principal of Gzowski College, which is the building in my background right now. And it's great to see so many people here today. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. We are on the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We want to offer our gratitude to the First Nations for their care for and teaching about our earth and our relations, and may we honor those teachings, miigwech, for the land that we are on. And I would add to that that the Elders Gathering is this weekend, and you can join the Elders Gathering for free, and it is a great way to learn a little bit more about the cultural and traditional teachings, not only in Enwayaang and in our area, but all around Canada, actually, for the Elders Gathering. So that's a great opportunity this weekend for you. So as I said, Enwayaang, the way we speak together, and today we are really lucky to have with us Nadège Compaoré, who is a Trent University alum, and I'm just going to read a little tiny bit of her bio to us. So hold on one second. Many screens are open. Not going to be able to find it. And Nadège, what year did you actually graduate? That's something I didn't have here.
2007.
2007, okay.
And like a lifetime ago.
2007, yes. So I'll start with this part, actually. We invited you in part because I can't remember why, but I came across something you were working on or writing or reading, and then I saw Trent University. And when I read a little bit more, I realized that you've been an undergraduate at Trent, which I don't know that we met when you were here. And on top of that, when I did a little more digging, I realized you had been a member of Gzowski College, which just warmed my heart. And I thought, well, wouldn't this be a great guest for our Enwayaang talks? So Nadège is currently an assistant professor in the political science department at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. Her research is concerned with claims of sovereignty by states and communities affected by natural resource extraction in Africa. Before completing her graduate degrees at Queen's University, as I said, Nadège received her bachelor's degree in international political economy from Trent University, where she was a Trent International Program Scholar. Nadège is also a board member of Women in International Security Canada and of the Canadian Association of African Studies. So when we do Enwayaang, we always say you get to talk about whatever you like. It's a go, whatever you want to chat about and your passion and your engagement. And Nadège is going to talk a little bit about belonging on campus and her experience as a Trent International scholar, and her experience not only at Trent, but I think in the wider Peterborough community. So Nadège, I welcome you. I'm really glad to have you with us. We're very grateful, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for the kind introduction and welcome. And thank you everyone for joining us in this conversation. I was just saying earlier before everyone came in that I was really excited to be here today because it was the double homecoming for me, coming back to Trent and Gzowski, since I lived there during 2004 and 5. But this kind of weird double dipper, not for Gzowski, but I was first in Champlain and then I stayed and then I was in Gzowski. So the only thing that would top this would be to obviously be in person and walk around Gzowski. I really have some incredible memories from my time there, and I miss that yellow background as well. So I also wanted just to say, I don't know whether there's any member of the Trent International Program around, but I just want to give a special shout out to the TIP office and any TIP members, including just international students, because first, it's having the TIP scholarship. That was the reason why I was able to come to Trent. And also the TIP activities introduced me to Friends for Life. And I've seen a couple of names on the screen. So that just makes me extra happy. And I'm just looking forward to especially hearing from everyone and students who are here with us during the Q&A in terms of the conversation that we will have. So when I was trying to prepare this, I guess it's a prompt for a discussion. Melanie would know this because I was just not sure what to talk about. It's a lot easier for me to talk about my research, but not so much other things. And so, after that, a student group at the University of Toronto in Mississauga asked me the question of what it means to be Black at UTM. And when I was trying to answer that question, my mind took me way back to my time at Trent University. And then the idea of belonging and community on campus is what I settled for, because they were always the focus of the discussions that I was having with myself in my mind. And it was not just belonging on campus, but also just the community building that took place within campus, and just especially led by students on campus in ways that, for me, in hindsight, I see that they were powerful acts of resistance. But I don't think at that time, I thought about it that way. So this UTM question also took me to a question that I've heard ever since I first landed in Canada, which was not first at Trent, but it was for a 2-year international baccalaureate degree in an international high school in Victoria, in BC. Some of you may know the United World College of the Pacific. And that question was, where are you from? You know, we must have asked each other that question in that school for the orientation week hundreds of times. And I did not used to mind this question at all when I first heard it. And I guess the context matters a lot. My international high school was truly international. We're just 200 students. Even all the teachers were from everywhere, including the Canadians. We had only one Canadian per year, including all the provinces and territories. So we were really, really from everywhere. So even somebody who was from BC would introduce themselves. I remember very well this guy called Nick, and he was so excited that people were saying where they were from. So he kept saying, I'm Nick from BC, beyond the orientation week. And my friend Simon, and we became very good friends quickly because he was Francophone and my English was quite dreadful at that time. He wouldn't just say he's from Quebec, he would say, I'm from Rivière-du-Loup, which a lot of non-Francophones were finding hard to say. And I'm saying this to say that I think it's quite interesting that fast forward, things had changed quite a bit. Before a lot of people came in for this talk, I was already telling people what my name meant and things like that. So I remember when I would tell people that I'm from Burkina Faso, I would say Ouagadougou, and I would go on to say what it meant, which, by the way, it means come and praise us, which is a very pompous meaning, but it's also a distortion in French, but the pronunciation will be different. But yes, sadly, I don't like that question anymore, unless I bring it up or the context is very clearly calling for it. And I now understand that a lot of people who are in my shoes are feeling the same way. And I think it's because the dynamics between when I arrived in Canada 20 years ago in that specific school, and later on, there's been a lot more layers and nuances to my time in Canada. And this is when I started to retrace when these feelings of uneasiness around where you're from started. It led me to Trent, but specifically it actually led me to Peterborough, to be more precise. It was the summer of 2004, and I was just done with my first year undergraduate at Trent. I was actually working at the TIP office as a summer student assistant, and I was walking home. And it must have been around 5 and 6 p.m., lost in my thoughts, thinking about how the summer job was going. Most of my friends had left for the summer, so there wasn't actually that many international students around, or just, students in general. And I noticed a group of teenage boys who were sort of getting louder as they drove by. And I thought it was a bit strange because they seemed to slow down as they approached my level, but then they continued. So I didn't pay too much attention. And then before I knew it, they had come back. They had gone their way and then drove back. And then suddenly I heard the N-word. And it was only me on the sidewalk, as they were, must have been about 5 of them or so in a van. And and then they added, you African B word, go back to your country. And I just remember being so stunned that instead of focusing on the N word, I was just thinking, first of all, how do they know I'm from Africa? I could have been born in Peterborough. I could have been born in Toronto. I could be from other places than the continent. But also, if you say go back to Africa, maybe go back to your continent, not your country. So I was really just focused on all these things, perhaps because I was avoiding focusing on some other things in their sentences. And I didn't really speak to anyone about this until maybe a week later. And when I did, a lot of my friends were also still not around who may have identified with this. And the few people that I talked to, especially because I was working on campus, tried to tell me that it was just a few bad apples. Canadians were really friendly in general, and I shouldn't pay much attention to it. And at that time, when my friends came back, this is when I was able to process a lot of these things and realize that it were not really isolated incidents. And we began then, this is all in hindsight that I realized all this, but I think we all began to retreat even further within our own circles and not mingle so much with other people who may not understand that level of racialization or marginalization. What's interesting is we all felt safe on campus, but then we didn't feel safe at all off campus. And it didn't seem like the university was supposed to do anything for us since these were off-campus issues. Technically, we lived off campus in Peterborough because we're part of Trent, and our well-being on campus was obviously very much tied to our well-being in other spaces and aspects of our lives, which seem to be fundamentally tied to our visible racialization, something that our non-racialized peers did not have to worry about. And I kept thinking to myself, why do we have to worry about this and on our own? But we seem to understand and believe that this was how things were supposed to be. And again, it's not really until much later, I suspect maybe even just a few years ago, that I realized that this was a time where I started to doubt so much more about myself. You know, I started to notice that I was quite often the only Black person in my political science classes. I noticed that there was no Black professors in any of my departments in my 4 years at Trent. And I was there on a tip scholarship, which was supposed to be a sign that I was a very good student, but I started to really doubt a lot of these things and nothing was ever enough. I just felt like I needed to prove myself more to belong. And I mean, the list goes on. I just wanted to share all of this. I wasn't quite sure whether I wanted to start the talk this way, but I thought that it would be important to do this because I think we separate so much when we talk about campus life, student life, and huge aspects of the student's life that technically cannot be separated from their performance, from their integration, from how they feel about themselves and how they feel about belonging and not belonging. So this is the first thing, but first of all, I really do hope that the city of Peterborough is more welcoming to students who look like me, especially compared to those summers when certain folks in the city came out to take their city back from what they perceived as foreigners, especially from international students who were racialized. And I say this because at that time, there were all these signs on the streets in the city for safe spaces, but I didn't quite notice much on campus in terms of addressing those things. So again, there was like this disconnect between Peterborough versus campus. Campus was super safe, but then after first year, unlike me, most people will actually be in the city. So I thought this would be a tangible way to engage in conversations on belonging on campus in a way that goes beyond the physical confines of the campus and in a way that's relational, in a way that ultimately speaks to how the campus experience of the students life is fundamentally tied to their positionality, to their experiences in and out of the classroom, and certainly in and out of campus. For instance, I can speak to, I think, any international student who maybe, let's say, actually, even if you're American, you still need a lot of visa issues. But I think dealing with just multiple visa policy changes, endless restrictions about how we could work, immigration rules, all of which directly would affect your finances, your well-being, and obviously how much more you could focus on your coursework and whether we could actually be allowed to remain in the country. I know that some people actually had that issue, couldn't even stay to finish. And now when I see with the pandemic protocols, especially, and this is not about Trent, this is just all universities across the country, a lot of the protocols clearly didn't have enough space to actually deal with what those protocols would mean for international students. And when they did, there was not that much effort in actually assisting them. Even up to now, I would say that's how I feel with a lot of students that I'm either teaching or mentoring who are international students. And that's just for all international students, even those that are not racialized. And yet most of these limitations and challenges that students would face are not really designed or taken into account when we think about various opportunities, various requirements in and out of the classroom, about student life, assessing students' contributions to various aspects of campus life. So I thought that I wanted us to try and move beyond typical discussions of isolated, sort of restricting what belonging means to just the typical student life aspect, because I think we have a long way to go in designing things that are more equitable and inclusive of all students, for students to feel like they truly belong when all aspects of their lives are not truly taken into account into university structures and policies. I think this is where I really wanted to go in terms of our discussions, because I think the real institutional work is what is actually needed. I remember when I talk about us retreating amongst ourselves, and I don't mean to homogenize experiences that various racialized folks would have had on and off campus, and different people are able to cope in different ways better than some others. But I think for the most part, most of us really found a lot of these sort of safe spaces or inclusive spaces where you might have like racialized folks with allies as well sometimes, that were really, really helpful, and there were places that we could thrive. However, I think there needed to be much more institutional work, not only to actually remove the burden from the students, because engaging students that are already doing so much of like invisible labor, effective labor that is not really recognized in a lot of their performances. I mean, it's needed, but it shouldn't really be their job. So it goes back to the issue of belonging and how much more certain folks have to do in order to feel like they belong. So I'm just hoping that the conversations that are being had across the country in all universities on EDI really truly engage students themselves, especially undergraduate students. Actually, I think I can say that from the many universities I've attended as an undergrad, a grad student, a postdoc in 3 different spots, in 3 different universities as a postdoc, and now as a professor. I guess I've clearly become a professional campus dweller. But I can say that I think undergraduates tend to lead the change, and have always been doing the work from the ground up by initiating and sustaining conversations and often calling administration to account. I think sometimes even really affecting policy change, right? Because sometimes the policies right now for international students in terms of work, possibilities of work when you're on a student visa on and off campus are wildly different from the extremely restrictive ones that I was facing when I was an international student. And I know that's in no small part thanks to, it's a huge part thanks to students themselves who have put pressure on universities, who have also themselves had to relay that kind of information, because Canada was losing out so many international students to other countries that were a lot less restrictive. So I remember, for instance, that for 2 years here, I couldn't really work easily unless, I won't walk you through the visa policies, but I went on exchange to England. And as soon as I arrived, I was told that I could work anywhere that I wanted. And I was only there on an exchange visa for the academic term. So these are a lot of the issues, in addition to the, the very sort of disturbing and distressing one that I gave as an example, which is also part of the space of, at the time, my life, that it didn't feel like there was spaces on campus to be able to deal with that. But I suspect that most universities have come a long way in at least having spaces where you can address these things. But I really hope, in order to end my reflections, because I wanted to keep it to about 25 minutes, that we just begin to recognize all these various complexities of student life that actually prevents one from being able to say, yes, I feel like I belong, because otherwise it's a series of changes that occurs in someone, and often it's not reversible. So for me, it makes me very sad that now I'm extremely suspicious of anyone who would just say, hey, where are you from? Depending on the context. I think some contexts it's very obvious that you'll talk about it, but that just never used to be the case for me. And that's just a random example, but I've had the real privilege of having really long-time friends, especially friends from Trent, who are still my friends, and I think who all of us used to be a lot more naive, but just a lot more positive about life in terms of belonging. And we're not so, that's not so much the case now. But I want to end my reflections here. I want to express appreciation to all students who are doing this kind of invisible labor of resistance and community building in one way or another, which is very taxing in many ways, and without recognition of how that impacts their student life. I think it's a crucial labor of love that brings real change and helps peers in incredible ways. So I really hope that the institutions everywhere, I know this talk is at Trent, but I'm really speaking to everyone across the board. And I hope that institutions recognize this a lot more and step up to the plate. So I'll end here for questions.
Thank you so much, Nadège. Really powerful and really moving to hear your words, and to hear, as you were speaking, thinking about, what do I think has changed and how much? I mean, it's a really interesting question, thinking about that span of time. And I will open it up to questions. One of the things I was thinking about when you were talking is the geography of a campus like ours that is removed from the downtown core versus one that's integrated with the downtown core. And we can talk about that later. That was just my immediate, I've wondered if on the one hand, there's some safety in having a campus, but then, as you said, that feeling of two worlds and not always feeling the support across both is interesting to think about, and whether it's better or worse. I don't really know if it's better or worse. And then the other part I was going to add is that we've had we just had a series of recommendations come out at Trent around working harder to talk about equity and diversity and inclusion on our campus. And I think that that's going to open up some really powerful conversations that we've been trying to have for many years, as you reflected. But of course, we're not fully there yet. But I'm happy to say we have a lot of really committed students, and I agree, they're doing a lot of the emotional labor that you talked about, and they're still fighting the fight, Nadège. I mean, they are really active and strong leaders, and they've been pretty involved with those committee recommendations and will be involved in the next stage of that, which is actually to get a lot more of that conversation with students. So I guess that's the good part. I will stop myself and ask if anybody wants to ask a question or make a comment. Glenys, go for it.
Sorry, thanks, Mel, and thank Nadège for joining. And there's I'm from Trent International, and I see we have a couple of others here that are joining. There's Kath, and I think it was Kate maybe that you recognized, and a bunch of us are here to hear your experience. So I guess we just want you to know, first of all, and I also see Sandra here, who was on the anti-racism task force. There may be others, so I'm not looking at all the names. And there were about 50 recommendations covering the 2 campuses, and they were pretty, we did talk to the entire community, to students, to faculty, and to staff. So we continue, I want you to know, with Trent International, to build on the tradition and your experience when you came, and to make sure that that is even better, and to provide that safe space. So we're still doing the work, and we continue to work with students on the visa side. So I guess I would love to know some of the belonging on campus. I did love the cover of your talk. There's specific things that maybe at another time, maybe we don't need to get into them now, but what can we do as Trent International to create this space where students really do feel belonging on campus? And if it's something that we have to do off campus, and we are working with the New Canadian Center, and we're on committees with that, and we're working with the city and the local police to ensure that the community is safe. But interested to hear what kind of specific things that maybe you enjoyed that we can augment now.
Thank you very much, Glenys. Yes, I don't think we've met, but I definitely recognize a couple of names from TIP in the list. So it's nice to see you all here. I first want to, I think, in order to answer your question, I want to actually follow up on a comment that Melanie made about the geography at Trent. I think Trent was the only place I've ever been in a university with my many university memberships that had that kind of geography. And now when I think about it, it is very strange. Like, I personally was feeling so much safer on campus that I, along with a lot of the friend group, we would stay until the library is closed, even if we were not really working, because where are you going in a city that doesn't really want you there? And I actually remember that summer that a lot of Black guys were walking together because they had actually been physically assaulted, not just verbally. So it was a really dark time. I think I actually remember we lost a few, not when I say lost, a few African students actually moved. I mean, they found transfers to other universities. So I just wanted to say that I think that was one of the symptoms. I don't know whether it was for good or for bad, but because we just didn't feel so safe at all on campus. And I mean, it was not just racism, it was a lot of homophobia and just across the board. We just stayed on campus. We just created all sorts of uncomfortable spaces, physically uncomfortable spaces, but that was mentally and emotionally comfortable just to stay. And I think I probably chose to stay. I mean, I was very privileged that I had a full scholarship, so I was able to stay on campus in my second year. And I know, not that I think, in fact, my friends made fun of me for that, because which second year stays on campus when they're not even, what do you call the students, the dons, like I wasn't a don. But actually that's why I stayed on campus. And I wouldn't really be that honest to other people about that, because then I didn't have to face people. And I was staying in the summers most of the time. So that said, I don't know, to answer Glenys's question, that I have solutions on what we could do, but I think, again, you know, I should acknowledge, because I was a TIP scholar, I think first of all, I knew all of the resources that I could access from the TIP office, with a lot of students didn't know about. And some students actually missed the TIP International. So we have like that weekend orientation, which is where I actually made lifelong friends that are still my friends to this day. And I know it's actually the same for a lot of other people. Some students didn't come because maybe they thought, I mean, it's already so expensive to be an international student. This is like an extra cost, or perhaps because of visa issues, they were not able to attend. So there's extra isolation where some students just didn't know what to do. I just remember meeting a student like in their third year who was international, and they knew that, you know, the TIP office was helping them with administrative stuff, but they had no idea there was this other whole social network of things that they could do. So in that sense, I think the fact that even I felt like I could belong to some spaces on campus is even a privilege compared to some other people that just didn't even have half of that access, right? I created this French club from scratch because I used to be so obsessed with, like, you know, things like French literature. That was like my first interest in school anyway. And the fact that, you know, there were all sorts of resources to support me, all sorts of guidance, etc. Again, so many people didn't know about. I know that the TIP office, I don't know how it has changed now, but, you know, it was doing a lot with extremely few resources. So I guess perhaps what I'm trying to say is, if it hasn't been expanded yet, if the resources haven't been, you know, developed further and completely expanded to, because it was fairly centralized as well. There's some students who used to be in that other campus. It's funny how I forget so fast. It was a very unpleasant bus ride to go up there. I can't remember the name.
Trail campus.
Yes, yes. Who just wouldn't come because, you know, it was. So I think I was trying to connect the 2 points by saying that I think geography is extremely important, but also I think just information. I guess now we have social media in a way that wasn't nowhere near this when I was on campus. So perhaps that could also be helpful, but.
Thanks for that, Nadège. Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I keep thinking about that geography piece, but I mean, I would like to say, yes, that Trent International has expanded and they're doing great work. So we really have, and I think to your last point about social media, that actually has helped connect more students across more time. And even international student orientation has changed to reflect the students who can't, as you said, can't get here early enough for the full, for that full experience. But yeah, that's really interesting. Does anyone else want to ask a question or hop in at this point? Barb, I can see Barbara's hand up.
Hi, Nadège. My name is Barbara and I work with Trent International as well. Also a Trent, not a Trent, but an international student from years ago as well. And I guess my question is, we've spoken about all the things that weren't being done at the time and have not been done up until this point. But I guess my question is, when you look back at that time, what are those memories now that you can feel that in those moments you felt that you belong for a little bit? If that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm asking the correct question, but it's like, when you look back, were there moments where you felt, I wish I had more of this? And what was that for you?
Yes, I mean, that's a very good question. And for me, this is, I guess I was trying to really speak to the wider group, because I really feel like I had, as an international student, I probably had the most privileged experience, right? On campus, because I was a TIP scholar. I mean, we just had access to so much, and we were able to organize. I will say this, the TIP office for us, we knew as TIP scholars, there were resources, they really wanted us involved on campus, they really wanted us to, I mean, we had a scholarship for those reasons, right? That you had this leadership abilities, etc. But, and if you know, the students that I often, you know, that I used to teach, especially when I was at Queen's and I kept comparing to Trent and they kept being annoyed, is because I had such fond memories of my time at Trent on campus, right? I had awful memories of Peterborough, and I've avoided it since, but I absolutely loved my time at Trent. But I guess I'm just trying to speak to those who didn't have access to it. So, but if I want to enumerate, it's just so much that I don't even know where to start. But I think for me, as I said, just being able to even create clubs that, you know, you feel that you thrive in, and be able to galvanize, bring people, have the support. I mean, we knew, or at least I knew, all of the tip office staff on first name basis. Like, we just knew so much about each other. But again, like, I just had privileged access to them in the way that most international students didn't. In fact, something that just like made me sad is that a new friend that I made in second year, when I was telling them about various opportunities, they were like, oh, we thought that was for the TIP scholars. And I was like, no, it's for everyone. So I think it just goes back to the information, right? I, on campus, had access to a lot, but even then, when I really break it down, it was, to use the word that's just been sort of overused, so I won't use it, but it was secluded. I didn't really take part in many things to do with the wider Trent student club. I think, Kemi, you did, not to put you on the spot, but I remember you were involved in Champlain College and in the wider Trent University. But I think if you think about it, you can probably count the number of like international students who were, but we were everywhere with the TISA, with TAXU, all of the clubs that were just focused on international students, on, you know, Africans, Caribbeans, like anything that was really racialized or international, we were there, but we were not in the wider community. So memories from TIP from day one, like that orientation week, I think is like the best thing that could have ever happened. I don't think that my time at Trent, I would love Trent so much, or I would feel as integrated with that circle of friends if I didn't have that. But again, all these people who couldn't attend, what happens to them, right? And also, why couldn't we all be like Kemi and be able to just join all these other groups? But I can tell you that I didn't necessarily feel welcome. And I think part of not feeling welcome in some of these spaces is not really, it's a cultural thing. You know, you go to an event where people are talking about stuff that you have no understanding about, even just movies. And so I try not to do that anymore in my class, but sometimes I catch myself, like maybe I talk about, have you seen this Netflix show on this and this? And maybe I haven't, a first year international student in my class who maybe not even, you know, their English is developing. I don't know, but I try to pay attention when I do this. I'm a little bit all over the place, but it's a hard question to answer, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
No, I think you did. I think you did, Nadège. I think you did answer it. And as you were talking, I was thinking one of the things we've learned the last few years is that there is a difference. You just referenced it, but there is a difference for students when you say, oh, everyone's welcome versus, no, you are welcome and I want you to come and join this event. And we've really learned that just to say, oh, all welcome. And we've learned that in the college system at Trent, that when we say all welcome, that's true. But I've had international students say to me in the college, I understand you said all welcome, but if you had said international students, you are welcome to attend this event, then I feel more directly included. And so that's interesting too, that we sometimes miss the mark when we say, well, we said everyone, but we did, but we didn't make a careful and more specifically engaging welcome to students who are feeling more difficult time, as you said, transitioning in. And I think to your point, I mean, we know students have a hard time anyway coming into university. And as you said in your talk, when you add all the layers of what that transition is like, it's really challenging. So I really appreciate that. I'm just going to go to Sylvia and then Carol.
Thank you very much. I'm probably taking this a little bit out of the Trent circles. So maybe Trent can, anyway, I think I really appreciate your talk, Nadège, and I really appreciate the fact that you talked about the holistic, wellness and well-being of students, because often it is the idea that universities And I think, that, universities do create these bubbles, right? These bubbles where people can, and then sometimes the moment you step out of that bubble, then you realize, oh my goodness, where did I come to? Should I have even been here? So I think, the message and the takeaway is that universities do need to work harder, especially in their communities, in their cities, advocate stronger in those cities, because after all, as Nadège was saying, as one who is also being an international student in small, in Kingston, when everyone else disappears, when that bubble bursts and you do have to walk into these spaces, it becomes such a lonely, lonely, lonely place. And I think that in that sense, sometimes you don't then feel the welcome, that the university previously put out. And so I just wanted to appreciate that link. It's really important to make those connections between, the holistic, these students aren't these atomized bodies, right? We are, all of these things that make us who we are. And also maybe just to add a little bit that I was an international student, I would say, fortunately, as a graduate student, because by the time you are a graduate student, you are a little bit more, you are able to handle certain things a bit better. But now working as faculty, sometimes when you meet the international students who are struggling with these things, right? The invisible labor that Nadège is talking about is not just at how much harder they are working just to organize, create safe spaces. Some of it then gets downloaded again to faculty of color, especially in university spaces. So I really wanted to thank you for bringing all of these different threads together in one short conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Sylvia. Yeah, and I think the more we talk about it, when we know more, we do better, I hope. And I'm glad that you brought that up and glad that we're having the conversation. Carol, go ahead.
Sorry. Nadège, did you want to say anything to Sylvia or with just before no, you're good?
No, I'm good. I appreciated the comment. I think, so Sylvia and I met at Queen's. One of the reasons we met is, she's a Black person. I hadn't seen Black people for a while on campus. Literally, this is a true story. And then we started speaking. Our other friend, Alvin, who is from Cameroon, she's now at UCLA doing physics. She's a physics prof. So there was no way we would have ever met in terms of the circles, which is why I'm mentioning what she studies. But she came to me and she's like, I haven't seen a Black person for a while. And then we just became friends. And so it's just that I agree with everything. And here's an actionable item that, hopefully a lot of the universities are starting to do, which is to hire more faculty of color that are excellent, that are out there, that are deserving. And that way the recruitment for students will just be much easier. I know that when I was at Queen's, because that's probably the longest I've been in one university, because I did my master's and PhD there, a lot of top students were being, so the university was losing out to other top universities because the students would be told that there's no diversity there, so run for the hills. And Queen's has been doing a lot, I think, in the past, whatever. I know this is a trend, but I'm just giving, I guess, an example of going towards this type of, I don't want to use the business language of best practices, but, they've done an insane amount of recruitment of faculty of color. They've done an insane amount of recruitment of top students all over the world that are racialized, Indigenous and Black folks especially. So I think, seeing other people who look like you, as basic as it seems, is one of the simplest way for someone to feel like they belong and that, they're supposed to be there, right? So thank you. I'll shut up now.